Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Revolution Recap. The regular season closed out Sunday afternoon as the Revs dropped a 3-1 result in Atlanta. Darlington Nagbe, Joseph Martinez, and Julian Gressel all found the back of the net for the hosts, while Christian Pinilla scored the Revs' lone goal on the day. Thankfully, the match had little impact on seeding, with TFC winning and Philadelphia losing, and the game was more or less a preview of the first-round matchup we'll see between Atlanta and New England in a few weeks. I'm Greg Johnstone. Joining me today is Sean Donahue. Sean, how's it going?
You know, I was hoping after this game today we'd be planning a trip down to Philadelphia to see a Revolution playoff game in Philadelphia. So selfishly, a little disappointed with how the day played out, but it was an entertaining Revolution game. If as it turns out, very meaningless game that meant about as much as a preseason friendly at the end of it.
Yeah. You have to think, too, that there wasn't as much intensity as we'll see in 2 weeks. Certainly there was some fireworks at the beginning, but it seemed like the Revs kind of lacked that sense of urgency of trying to get back. I mean, they did respond after the first goal, but it seemed like the second half it was kind of inevitable. It seemed more to be about Michael Parkhurst at the end. So hopefully in 2 weeks there'll be a different type of, I don't want to say atmosphere, but a different type of urgency, and hopefully the Revs kind of stay in it a little bit longer than they did this afternoon. But Sean, what were your key takeaways from today's match?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things I think you can take away from this one. At the same time, though, you look at how this game played out, and Bruce Arena's halftime comments about it kind of being too loose, and I don't think when you get into a playoff game, we're going to see a game kind of as loose and as open as we saw in this one. But with that said, I do still think there are a few things the Revolution can take away from this one. The first being that the finishing just has to be better. When you're playing a team like Atlanta United, you're generally not going to get as many chances as the Revolution had in this one, and I think that goes to the point that I just made about it, being a looser game that you'd expect in the playoffs. But they had some really good chances. Christian Pinilla scored a great goal, but he should have scored before that. Right before Atlanta scored, they had a breakaway that Pinilla kind of had 2 bites at the apple. He first sent it right at Brad Guzan and got the ball back and had a couple of defenders between him and the goal, but the goalie was out and didn't finish that one, and then Atlanta goes down the other way and scores. And then Pinilla had another chance later on where he was called offside, but it was a kind of a sitter that he sent wide, albeit it was fast play, but he's a guy that likes to do better with that. I thought Pinilla actually, if you ignore the finishing, had a fantastic game today. He was everywhere. He created a lot of chances for himself and others. But I think it's kind of been a theme over the last few months of the season that Pinilla's doing really well and getting in great spots and getting some goals, but probably getting maybe a third of the goals that he should have with some of the chances he's created. And then you look at a guy like Joseph Martinez and the opportunities he has and how he runs between the defense and finishes off even after he's been off for a long layoff. You could see his quality tonight, and compare that to a guy like Teal Bunbury, who had 3 shots tonight and actually set up the first goal for Pinilla. So, he didn't have a terrible game, but, obviously a different caliber when you're looking at a Joseph Martinez versus a Teal Bunbury. So that was just my first takeaway from this game, was that the Revolution need to find a way to finish their chances. And Pinilla is not the only target, that should have done better in this one. I thought, Brandon Bai had a, absolute sitter where he kind of had an empty net that he just rushed too much and shot over the goal. So that was, disappointing, especially, as we've talked about before, the Revolution kind of have Brandon Bai as more of a winger than a fullback for most of the game. So if they're going to play him in that position, he's going to kind of skirt his defensive duties. You really need somebody like him to put that chance away. So that was a disappointing moment for the Revolution. But overall, there were just a number of chances in this one where the Revolution, probably should have had 3 goals in this one, and maybe this game should have ended, 3-3 or 4-3 Atlanta, because Atlanta, missed some chances that they wouldn't normally miss either. But it was just a reminder that when you're playing a team of the quality of Atlanta, you can't waste chance after chance and expect to take points away.
Yeah, and looking at Stats Zone, they say the Revs had 4 big chances while Atlanta had 2 big chances. So, I know that's not an exact measurement, but then you also look at shots on target. Revs had 4, Atlanta had 9, and Atlanta had 19 shots, and the Revs had 16. So, yeah, I think you can kind of look back on this game, and it looks a little lopsided, a 3-1 game, but when you consider the chances that the Revs missed, it's not like they weren't getting their opportunities. They just weren't converting on them. And I can't imagine we're going to see many changes in this lineup. I think this is the same lineup that we're going to see in 2 weeks. So I think Christian Pinilla is going to be a key part of this team that, they're going to need him for those counterattacks. They're going to need Teal Bunbury for those counterattacks too. So, and as you say, they'll probably start Brandon Bai up on the wing as well. So it really comes down to just converting your chances and making them count against a team that's really, really hard to face at home. My key takeaway actually is going to be a person that you mentioned. It's not going to be on the Revs though, and it's Joseph Martinez. And we were a little surprised to see him starting. He's been out of the lineup recently. We kind of thought maybe we would see him for a few minutes and maybe he'd get a test run. And, coming up to this week, I know we've gotten a lot of questions, Sean, about would you rather face Philadelphia or Atlanta? Assume Joseph Martinez is out or assume Joseph Martinez will be playing. And I think that answers a lot of those questions with his performance today. A full 90 minutes. He was very effective, a goal and an assist, 87% passing. He had 5 shots, although only 2 were on target. But still, he made a massive impact on this game that I don't think can be replaced. So I think knowing that the Revs are going into Atlanta and they are going to have to face 90 minutes of Joseph Martinez, or at least a fully healthy Joseph Martinez, what it appears like, I think that is a worst case scenario for the Revolution compared to maybe playing against Atlanta without Joseph Martinez or going to Philadelphia. I think we were surprised to see him in the lineup starting, but he certainly showed that whatever injury concerns he had previously, I think he's going to be ready to go in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. He was fantastic. He looked 100% healthy. He didn't look like a guy coming off of an injury. A guy of that quality, he was the top scorer in the league last year, broke all those records. Now his records have been broken by Carlos Vela today, but still, even with injuries this year and with what was, at the beginning of the year, a down year for Atlanta United, he still finished in the top 3, so you can't underestimate his quality. But, when you talk to Joseph Martinez, that kind of goes to what was my other takeaway that I almost let off with, and that's the Revolution defense really gave him way too many opportunities. There were a couple times where Andrew Farrell and De La Mea kind of let him slide in between them, and when you have a team like Atlanta with the quality they have, guys like Julian Gressel who can, as we saw a few times today, just play that perfect pass to split the defense. Somebody really needs to be a lot closer to Joseph Martinez to kind of intercept that ball or find a way to make that not happen, because Farrell caught up to him on one play at one point in this game, but Joseph Martinez is a guy that I don't think Antonio De La Mea is going to catch up to, and more often than not, if he gets behind the defense, he's probably going to score. And they're just time and time again where we found ways to kind of split the defense or play off Farrell's back or De La Mea's back or break an offside trap. And when you have someone of his quality, there has to be somebody on him at all times, I think, for the Revolution to really have a chance at beating Atlanta United.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And another thing too that you mentioned the defense too. One weak spot that I think might be an issue is that we've been talking about Julian Anibaba on the left side, and I thought Julian Gressel had an amazing game. I know Anibaba, we've talked about him kind of pinching in a little bit, and it seemed like Gressel is taking advantage of all that space out there, and he's certainly three key passes today, 2 assists. He had that amazing goal, which I don't think he could do a whole lot more on. But for example, that first goal he had where he slides the ball perfectly to Darlington Nagbe, I think that's a big weak spot for the Revolution. I think Julian Anibaba is still getting used to that kind of left back spot, and I think this was really the first week he's had someone as dangerous as Julian Gressel kind of on that right flank. So I'm curious to see if they still roll out Julian Anibaba in 2 weeks, or maybe if they go with DeJuan Jones, who I don't have a whole lot of, I don't want to say confidence in him, but it's kind of a pick your poison situation, because I think Julian Gressel on Anibaba or DeJuan Jones is a bit of a mismatch.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that completely. And honestly, as much as we talked about how good Joseph Martinez was in this game, I think if I was voting for a man of the match, it would probably be Julian Gressel. He had just a fantastic game. Obviously, a guy that went to Providence College, so has New England ties, but he just played amazingly well in this one. And you're right, Julian Anibaba, he was decent a week ago, but I didn't think he looked very good at left back in this game. With that said, as you said earlier in the podcast, I do think this is the lineup we're going to see in 2 weeks. I'd actually be very surprised to see Bruce Arena make any changes to this lineup, including at left back. So I think what we saw today, 11-wise is what we're going to see out there, and maybe there'll be some shifts in tactics and how they actually play, but I think that's the lineup that we're going to see going forward. And I think this game was used to kind of build continuity, and even with, Julian Anibaba not having the best game, I don't think anyone played in a way that, given the overall way they played this season, would lead to them being dropped for somebody else in the lineup. So, they're going to have to find a way to, keep that continuity going from this game and find a way to fix those issues. Like you said, the left back issue, and like I was talking about earlier, the kind of the holes in the central defense where Joseph Martinez was able to play off De La Mea and Farrell and find ways to get in behind them and kind of ruin their offside trap attempts.
And another person, shifting from the defense to the offense, one person that I'm a little bit, I don't want to say concerned about, but I think needs to have a better performance going into this Atlanta game is Gustavo Bo. We've seen how important Gustavo Bo is and how he has pulled the Revs, out from the depths of falling behind and able to salvage a point or salvaging all 3 points. Today, largely ineffective, 61.3% pass accuracy. He had 3 shots. All of them were blocked. He was 8 for 18 passing in the attacking third and 0 for 1 inside the penalty area. He might have had a chance early in that game when Christian Pinilla had that first chance of the game where he tried dancing around Guzan and kind of bobbled the ball. It looked like he could have slid the ball off to Bo, and Bo could have put it home pretty easily. But outside of that, Gustavo Bo was pretty quiet on the day. Do you expect Gustavo Bo to have a better match in 2 weeks against Atlanta, or are you just as concerned as me?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's one of the guys that probably more than anyone could use the week off to have the 2 weeks between this game and the next game. He missed that game a few weeks ago, or came off the bench a few weeks ago with an injury, and then went the full 90 in this one and played significant minutes in the week before. So I think if there's anyone on this Revolution team that could benefit from 2 weeks off, it's probably him. But yeah, the game today was kind of worrying. Atlanta kind of did neutralize Gustavo Bo. Didn't really threaten the goal very much in this game. So he's a guy that the Revolution count on to score goals in big moments. And if they're going to go anywhere in the playoffs, they're probably going to need some goals out of Gustavo Bo. But I'm not too worried. I think if anything, these 2 weeks will be good for him to get back into full shape. And he is 29 years old. He's not one of the youngest guys on the team, and he came in midseason, after playing in Mexico. So he could probably use a little bit of time off to adjust. But I do agree that this wasn't one of his better games, but I'm not too concerned about it.
Yeah, and Carles Gil too, I think could use a day off. He certainly had a pretty decent performance. 2 shots, 1 shot on target, 83% pass accuracy. He had a few key passes. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but Carles Gil still had a bit of a pretty solid impact on the game. But because Gustavo Bo, when he is shut down, very, very quiet. It's very difficult for him to kind of break out, whereas Carles Gil, it seems like, is still able to have a decent impact on the game when things aren't moving very well. One other player that might need a bit of a rest going into this Atlanta game, and one person that you want to see more involvement from overall, I would say, is Luis Caicedo. He had 1 shot that was off target, 86% pass accuracy, but that was only 14 passes. He only had 22 touches in his 58 minutes today. He was also 1 for 4 on tackles with 1 interception and 1 clearance and a yellow card. He had 3 fouls committed overall. Not much to say other than, hopefully Luis Caicedo gets a little bit more involved in that game, but Diego Fagundes comes on and has 3 key passes, 38 touches in the final 32 minutes of the game. That's a sub that they've been making a few times this year, but it seemed like the Revs had a little bit more, fluidity, I guess, with Diego Fagundes in the lineup. Sean, any thoughts on Diego Fagundes' performance today?
Yeah, and I'll touch on Caicedo first. I was surprising to me when I saw the end of the game, he only had 22 touches. Usually he is much more involved. And, you almost wonder if he picked up that early yellow card, and that tackle he got the yellow card on was a, pretty clear yellow, not a good tackle by him. But you almost wonder if he got that yellow card and kind of pulled back in his involvement in the game to try to avoid getting a second one and potentially be suspended for the playoffs. But, ignoring that possibility, it was a disappointing performance from him. Somebody that usually is kind of involved in every aspect of the game really wasn't in this one. So, he's another guy that I think the Revolution need to perform really well if they're going to go anywhere in the playoffs. But, he's also another guy that I expect this is kind of a one-off situation, and, going into Atlanta, we'll see more out of him. But as far as Diego Fagundes goes, I think it's kind of the opposite, where, there's been a lot of games this year where Diego has come off the bench or, played and hasn't had that much of an impact. But, even in situations like this where he's come on for Caicedo and hasn't done as much as you would have liked him to do, he was actually really good off the bench in this game. One of the leaders on the Revolution in touches, in passes anyways, despite only playing limited minutes. He actually had 94.3% passes. He led the Revolution in key passes, so heavily involved in the offense. And he attempted 35 passes, so that 94.3% isn't based on a small number. He was actually third on the Revolution in passes attempted after only Carles Gil and Wilfried Zahibo. So for as little involvement as Luis Caicedo had, Diego Fagundes came on for the last 32 minutes, and he was kind of everywhere on the offense. I think this was a game that probably suited him well in that role off the bench because the Revolution were really trying to push for a goal and sacrificing on defense a bit, down 3-1. But really just a good job for Fagundes given the situation and what he did coming into this game, and probably gives some confidence to Bruce Arena, where if the Revolution were to go into a game and kind of trailing late to bring Diego on to that kind of number 8 role in more of an offensive position to help out the Revolution's offense, because this was one of his better performances off the bench this year, I thought.
Yeah, and what's interesting too is that Matt Doyle had a column earlier this week that I think kind of made some waves on Twitter. I know that Jeff Lemieux mentioned it on the Far Post podcast, where Matt Doyle said that the Revs are not a team that is really built to play from behind. And part of me thinks about the Revs bench and how we've talked about how they kind of have a lack of attacking options. You have Juan Agudelo, you have Juan Fernando Caicedo, you have Diego Fagundes, and all of those are kind of good supporting pieces, but no one really kind of stokes fear in their opponents. And so, for Diego Fagundes to kind of come on as kind of an offensive option for Luis Caicedo and kind of have this game, I think that's a big difference maker if you can get a performance like this off of the bench in a game of need. Again, I think today might have been a little bit, less urgent than, say, a playoff game. So I'm not taking many conclusions from this afternoon against Atlanta. But overall, I do think that this was a good performance from Diego, and hopefully it kind of instills some confidence into him going into the playoffs, because I think we need that guy coming off the bench if we're behind. And I think the person to come off the bench and be kind of a playmaker or someone that can have an impact of the game from an offensive side, I think the clear answer to that is Diego Fagundes. With all due respect to Juan Agudelo and Juan Fernando Caicedo, I don't think anyone else can really change the game like Diego can if he's playing at his best. So, Sean, well, that's kind of summarized today's game against Atlanta. Let's kind of look forward to the playoff game in 2 weeks, also against Atlanta. What are your thoughts? Are you concerned? How do you assess the Revolution's chances going into the first round of the playoffs?
Yeah, and going back to what I said earlier and what you were saying about how you can't take too much away from this game, what you can take away is kind of the individual errors, and finishing certainly is an individual error, and some of the defensive errors you saw certainly are individual errors, and kind of seeing that at this stage of the season can be disappointing from the Revolution, certainly. So, like I said, I think the Revolution played pretty well in this game. I think up until that third goal, they were very much in this game. They had opportunities to go ahead several times. They should have gone ahead in the second or third minute before Atlanta scored their first goal. And there were other times when Pania and Brandon Bai should have put them either ahead or equalized for the Revolution at that point. So there are some positives to take from this game. The Revolution never really looked out of place. I do think they, to a certain extent, after that third goal, fell apart a little bit. And when you bring out Andy Baba and are playing with a natural left back, and when you bring out Luis Caicedo and bring in Diego Fagundes, you're really going forward offensively, and defensively you are going to have holes at that point. So I think the Revolution showed when all things being equal, they were a team that could hang with Atlanta United. But at the same time, there were those worrying moments when Joseph Martinez, who again is coming off a long layoff, so even though he looked very good, he'll probably look even better in 2 weeks. That's a worrying sign for me. But there was nothing from this game that told me the Revolution couldn't go into Atlanta and get an upset. There was also nothing from this game that told me Atlanta wouldn't still be the big favorites going into that matchup. So I think the Revolution, with a loss that they played decently well in can take some confidence. But I also think this is a good game for Bruce Arena to have kind of seen those mistakes the team was making defensively, and use that as a teaching tool going in 2 weeks to help the Revolution kind of shore it up and find a way to neutralize both Julian Gressel, who is playing good passes all day, and Joseph Martinez, who is finding more space than you would like to see him find.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And, I do think, too, we're talking about the Revolution missing some chances, too. It should be noted that, as usual, Matt Turner made some pretty amazing saves in this game, especially early on. He seemed to really keep the Revs in this game. If Matt Turner does not have a solid game, which, God forbid, maybe Atlanta puts this one away a little bit earlier. So this game could have been a little bit worse, could have been a lot better for the Revolution. But you're right. They're certainly within the kind of range where if the Revolution can come out and give their best performance and finish their chances, I think they could take this game in regulation. But I certainly wouldn't make them the favorites. So we do have a question on Discord from Gustavo Bo, is the best striker. He says, was Bruce Arena being coy tonight and not showing his hand because he knew we were coming back in 2 weeks? Which kind of goes into what we were talking about a little bit with the lineup and all that. I personally don't think there were many things that Bruce didn't show tonight. I think that the team that we got is probably the lineup that we're going to get, and the tactics might be a little similar. There might be some tweaks here and there, but I think Bruce Arena was certainly trying to win this game, even if it wasn't a playoff type mentality. I'll put it that way. Sean, you have anything to add to that?
No, I completely agree. I think this is, I'm almost certain that this is going to be the lineup we see in 2 weeks, barring an injury. I think Bruce Arena looked at this game as great preparation for the playoffs. He looked at, the fact that the Revolution do have 2 weeks off between this game and the next game. And as we talked about last week, to me, if you, were to rest your starters for this game, that'd be a big mistake, because I think, 3 weeks without a competitive game, that isn't a, good situation for rest. That's a situation that leads to a team being rusty. But I thought Bruce Arena went out there trying to win this game. I thought he put out his best 11, for this season. And I thought he did everything he could tactics wise to try to get a result. And it could have worked if Christian Pena puts away those chances, if Brandon Bye puts away his chance, it could have worked. So I don't think there was much hidden by Bruce Arena in this one, but I do think that he's going to have to look at this game and see why Julian Gressel managed to get the space to play those passes, why Joseph Martinez managed to get so open, a few too many times, and find a way to mark those guys more out of the game. Both of them have so much talent, you can't completely mark them out of the game, but you do have to find a way to get them a little bit less involved than they were in this one. But I really don't think Bruce Arena was trying to hide anything in the way he played this game.
Gustavo Bo on Discord also asked us, is Julian Gressel now Brandon Bye's dad? Which I think if you compare Julian Gressel to Brandon Bye's game, there was a pretty stark difference between the two. You mentioned Brandon Bye missed a few chances early in the podcast. Overall, Brandon Bye had about 74% pass accuracy. He did have 4 ball recoveries and wasn't dispossessed once, but 3 for 5 on tackles, 1 interception, 3 blocks, 3 clearances, 2 of which were headed. Assess Brandon Bye's game. I think a lot of people are, I don't want to say worried, but they might think that Brandon Bye is a bit of a weak spot on this Revolution team, and certainly he'll get some flack for missing those shots early in the game. But he still had 2 chances created in this game. So, what are your thoughts on Brandon Bye? And do you think that's the weak spot on the Revolution?
Yeah, and I do. I think we talked about Giuliani Bob at left back. I think that's potentially another weak spot. But just fullback in general. But at the same time, I'm not sure you can call Brandon Bye a fullback for the way he's playing under Bruce Arena. It's intentional, I think, but he's more playing as kind of that right midfielder that's kind of filling in the space when Carles Heel cuts inside and providing width. And he does a good job to get himself into good positions. But the final ball just isn't there. The shot's not there. I think one of those chances created, I haven't looked, but I'm assuming it's that one that led to a Carles Heel shot, and that one actually was kind of a flubbed cross that I think was intended for Bunbury, but bounced in the box and fortuitously landed to Carles Heel's feet. But I'm not sure if he deserves that much credit for that one. I actually didn't think he had a bad game, minus that. Minus the kind of the flubbed chances and the flubbed crosses. I thought he was pretty active and got involved in his passing accuracy. It felt a bit better. Let me see what it is. I have it up somewhere. Yeah, it was 73.9%, which for him is better than usual. So I didn't think it was a terrible game, and I think given where the Revolution are in the season, he needs to be their starter for the playoffs. But yeah, it is a weak spot for the Revolution. It is something they need to address in the offseason. And I do think he deserves to be criticized for missing what was pretty much an open net. And that chance that I think at the time would have tied the game for the Revolution. So, he's a guy that can add to your offense, but doesn't do it consistently enough where I think what you're giving up on defense to play him that way makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I agree. And I wonder too if DeJuan Jones, who I know is kind of the reserve outside back, and I know that we'll get to the news in the week earlier, but it seems like there'll be a little less competition at left back for the Revolution next season. But I wonder if DeJuan Jones will get a look at right back, because it seems like DeJuan Jones has a bit more speed and pace than Brandon Bye. And Brandon Bye, the appeal to him was that ability to cross and send in some crosses, some low crosses. But really, you have to kind of play him up. You have to play him as a right wing type. It's not really paying dividends, and I think we would wait in 2 years. So I wonder how solid Brandon Bye's spot on this team is for 2020, or if that's a spot they look to upgrade, or if they move Andrew Farrell back, or if they move DeJuan Jones there. There's a lot of things they can do. But yeah, Brandon Bye, week after week, it seems like he just can't really piece it together. And he might put in an okay performance, but he never puts in a performance that is really stellar. And, as you say, you're not getting a whole lot offensively for what you're giving up defensively. So also, I want to mention this really quickly, 'cause Jonathan Seal just tweeted this out a few minutes ago. But Andrew Farrell had another great week finished with 1 block, 2 tackles, 4 interceptions, 4 clearances, and 8 ball recoveries. And Andrew Farrell, of course, made the team of the week last week. So it should be noted that Andrew Farrell still nailing it down at center back, still had a pretty solid week overall. So even though there are some questions about that defense, Andrew Farrell is still a bit of a rock on that back line. So there was one positive I think you can take away defensively this week. So
on that note, I still think the communication between Delamea and Farrell in this game could have been better.
Oh, sure. How do you? Well, yeah. I mean, I guess at this point they can't really go away from Delamea. You're not going to go to Mancien, and you can't really bring in Annie Baba at this point. But I mean, that's the best. That's the defensive pairing we're going into the playoffs with. We're rolling the dice with it. Seems, yeah. I'm not as confident as I was last week, Sean.
No, they've had their moments. I think this game, if anything, perhaps made you, despite the finishing, perhaps made you more confident in the offense, because even though you talked about Gustavo Bou not having a great game, the team created a lot of chances despite that. So it probably made you more confident in the offense going into the playoffs. But there were just a lot of holes in that defense. And you mentioned Farrell had a good performance. He did, but at the same time, a couple of those times Joseph Martinez got free, and some of those times he recovered and saved it. Maybe in the first place he should have been a little bit tighter on Joseph Martinez. So it's one of those games that, again, was much more open than a playoff game is going to be. But individual errors from defenders against a team like Atlanta, with the quality of finishers they have, as we saw from Gressel, as we saw from Joseph Martinez. Pity Martinez didn't start this game, but he's another guy that if he comes off the bench or starts in the playoffs, is really good at putting away chances. So it's. I agree with you. I'm less confident in the team's defense after this performance than maybe I was a week ago.
And it should be noted too, looking ahead to the playoffs, because we talked about all the different types of scenarios last week. Just to be kind of clear about the Revolution's path, if they were to make a deep playoff run as the 7th seed, they are going to go at Atlanta 2 weeks from now in the first round of the playoffs, and then they would have to face the winner of Philadelphia TFC, and then they would have to face whoever comes out of that 1/4/5 seed, which would, if you are...
It's actually Philadelphia Red Bulls now, that with the crazy results that happened today. The Red Bulls dropped down from the 4th seed to the 6th seed.
Oh, great. Well, now I look stupid. Well, let's see. Let me amend that for all of our listeners, because I know you're not going to edit this out after I look stupid.
Of course not.
Oh, my goodness, Sean. Oh, goodness.
Decision day was exciting.
Yes. No, you're right. Yeah. Boy, the Red Bulls really fell hard, huh? So the Red Bulls lost. So it'll be at Atlanta and then at the winner of Philadelphia or Red Bulls, which I don't know. I almost would rather play Toronto.
I mean, before this weekend, yes, but the way these games played out, I mean, Red Bulls, with a home playoff spot on the line against a Montreal team that had nothing but pride to play for, lost 3-0. I mean, that doesn't give you too much confidence going to the playoffs for the Red Bulls. And then Philadelphia, with the 2nd seed on the line, maybe a little bit less important, losing at home 2-1 to New York City FC. So before this week, I would agree with you. I would, have rather played Toronto the way they were playing, but, Toronto got the job done this weekend, and New York and Philadelphia really didn't, and kind of did so in disappointing fashion, embarrassing fashion in the case of New York, I would say. So, you almost watch these weekend's games and think if the Revolution do get upset against Atlanta, it's a bit less intimidating going into Red Bull Arena or going into to play Philadelphia at Town Energy Stadium than perhaps it would be to go up against, Toronto FC based on their result this weekend. So, again, I think Atlanta is probably the worst team to face out of all these teams you mentioned, so getting past them is going to be the most difficult part.
Yes. And I mean, if I could pick and choose who I'd want in that 4-5-6, I think it'd be easy team to pick is DC United, who have kind of slid throughout the second half of this Eastern Conference, and there are a few players that are going to be leaving that club in the offseason too, so it might be a bit of a lame duck team that might not be putting the best effort out there, but regardless, it'll be at Atlanta and then at Philly or Red Bulls. And then whoever comes out of that 1/4/5 seed bracket, which is New York City FC, Toronto FC, and DC United. I would imagine New York City FC, who has home field advantage at City Field or wherever they're going to play, with their 11 wins, 1 loss, and 5 ties, with their home record. I imagine that New York City FC will be coming out of that side of the bracket. So the Revs just have to make it through at Atlanta, probably at Philadelphia and at New York City FC. So, hey, they can do it, right?
What's terrible is that those are both games that, if the Revolution were at Philadelphia or at New York, where you could get a good group of traveling fan support to go down there for an important playoff game if they weren't midweek games. It's really unfortunate that the scheduling worked out from MLS, that the first round is on a weekend, and then every other game up until MLS Cup is on a weekday, because those are some great regional rivalries where, the Midnight Riders and the Rebellion and, the Revs Army would probably put together a good traveling group to go down there. And I can't imagine that's going to happen for a Wednesday night game.
Yeah, that is true. That playoff schedule is a bit brutal. So should also be noted too that of these remaining teams, or of those top three teams, Atlanta has the most home wins out of those three teams. They have 12 wins at home, 2 losses and 3 ties. So very, very strong home team, as we saw today. And they seem to have gotten better as the season goes on. And they'll be at full strength with Joseph Martinez. So odds are against the Revolution to go in, but as they had a bit of a nice warm-up today. So hopefully they can make some corrections and go into this matchup in 2 weeks and steal one on the road in the Deep South.
Yeah, and when you talk about Atlanta's home record, one of those losses and 2 of those draws came in, I think, their first 3 or 4 home games when they started off really struggling. So since the first couple games, I think there's something like 12-1-1 or 11-1-1. So they've just gotten better and better at home as the season's gone on.
They've come a long way from DeBoer out. So
yes,
we can't let this week go without talking about the Revs' potential transaction this week. It will have no impact on the playoffs because the roster freeze is already done. But and this is the first time I'll get to mispronounce this guy's name on our podcast. But Alexander Butner. We'll
go with that.
Okay,
I'm not going to question it.
Former Manchester United player, so I should know it, but I've been reading a lot about it, and I haven't heard his name said yet. But he has reportedly signed a 2-year deal with the Revolution with a team option for a third. 30-year-old left back who most recently played in the Netherlands. He has spent time with Manchester United, Dynamo Moscow. He's been throughout Europe. Obviously would be a big signing for the Revolution at a hole that they've been trying to fill year after year after year between Edgar Castillo and Gabriel Somi, Chris Tierney. It seems like they have just had a revolving door of left backs that has at time been filled by players being played out of position like Julian Baba and DeJuan Jones and Brandon Bai and Kellen Rowe. So it seems like they're not messing around. They're going out and signing a left back that will kind of nail that position down for the 2020 season. Sean, do you have any thoughts on this signing? And we don't know any contract terms yet. I would imagine this is not a designated player signing. I imagine this would be a TAM signing, though. I imagine he'll have a bit of a high contract, probably around actually where we saw Gabriel Somi, which, if I remember correctly, was the $400,000 range. So, Sean, any thoughts on this signing for the Revolution?
Yeah, I'm making the same assumptions as you contract-wise. If this was a DP, I think my thoughts would be different. And the other thing I'll add is I'm disappointed you left out Claude Dielno when you were talking about the Revs' makeshift left backs. But I think this is a good signing for the Revolution to get an experienced left back in here. A guy who, with Gabriel Somi, he was a guy who was on the outside of his team and was, or a guy that was losing playing time at his current team and not playing at as high of a level as Butner's been playing at. So again, Butner's a free agent. He hasn't been playing himself since the end of the European season. So by the time he plays for the Revolution, I think he'll be, 6 months probably without playing, I believe. Is that the situation of his contract, I think?
About right.
Yeah. So, I think it's a good signing for the Revolution. If it's a TAM player, it makes a lot of sense. Left back's been a huge issue for the Revolution. He'll turn 31 before the season starts. That's not too old. It's, younger than Edgar Castillo. Unfortunately for the Revolution, Edgar Castillo didn't work out. We've talked before about DeJuan Jones and his potential, but I don't think he's really the answer for the Revolution at left back, at least not for the short-term future. I think this is a big move for the Revolution to shore up a position that, the Revolution need a lot of help in. So, curious to see what he does for the Revs, but on paper at least, it looks like a really good signing.
Yeah, and it should be noted that he did make 29 appearances for his club in the Netherlands last year. So he was getting full playing time too. I'm also reading too. I just Googled his name. So apparently Celtic was trying to sign him, and he turned them down to come to the Revolution. So I think this is the Bruce Arena effect, where players now want to come and play for the Revolution, which is a bit of an odd feeling. But I agree with everything you said. I think they're paying a bit of a premium here for him, but overall, I mean, it's a position that has been a headache for the Revolution, and it's good to see these things being addressed immediately. I know that in years past, we've kind of been waiting in the off seasons to see how certain polls are going to be filled and how certain weak spots are going to be addressed. And a lot of times we wait until January and February until we hear word of a signee that coming in or not signing or whatnot. And in the case of a certain rumored designated player, we had to wait 4 months into the season until we found out that he didn't want to play for the Revolution and Brad Friedel anymore. So it's great to hear that in November or October or September we're already have our first signing locked up in the season. And it should be noted too that Julian Cardillo noted that when Butner came in for training for a tryout basically in September, he heard that Butner had a very, very good open tryout or fitness training or however you want to say. So he's apparently in very, very good shape, even with all this time off between the summer and now. So it'll probably be an expensive signing for a left back. And I know we're not big fans of shelling out cash for a back line, but I think this is a signing that the Revolution needed to make. And it should be noted, too, that Claude Dielna is going to be a free agent again, Sean. So if there is a possibility of a reunion.
That's true. And looking at who scored, because they keep track of key characteristics of players based on their statistical output. It's interesting that Butner is noted as being very strong in defensive contribution, which people would not say was the case for the Revolution's current left back when healthy, Edgar Castillo. Also strong in crossing, key passes, and taking set pieces. Weak, though, in tackling and discipline, and the discipline part might be a bit concerning. But he's a guy that, last year you mentioned he had, I think, 29 starts. Passing accuracy was 76.4%, had 5 primary assists, 2 goals. Did have one red card, only one red card, but 7 yellow cards. So just kind of a preview of what you might get from him. An average a shot per game, which is kind of high for a left back. So, based on that, looks like he's somebody that will help the Revolution out defensively and also can serve in a good cross at times.
And it should be noted, too, though, he'll be turning 31 in February. So a little bit of a concern there. But as I say, I think this guy is extremely talented. And obviously, anyone that's played for Manchester United coming and playing for the Revolution, I think is, it's good to bring that kind of experience to MLS. So, Sean, that kind of wraps us up this week. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap it up here?
Well, the one other thing worth mentioning is that we've heard rumors and sort of confirmations, but I think we finally got a real confirmation, or at least close to that, from The Athletic, that the Revolution are going to have a USL League One team next year, and allegedly they're going to be playing at Gillette Stadium, which is interesting because I don't know how much it's going to cost to open up Gillette Stadium to host a USL League One team game that I can't imagine is going to have a very good attendance. So we'll see if that changes, but that is big news for the Revolution, because as we've talked about a lot of times on the show, there are a lot of young talent on the Revolution that just aren't getting minutes, and some of them have been loaned out, but other ones haven't been loaned out, and make the Revolution 18 but don't play. So that'll be a huge thing for the Revolution next year to have all those guys actually be able to stay with the first team and get USL League One minutes. So that along with the left back news, that is the other big news that came out for the Revolution this week.
Yeah, and I know that in the past the Revs have preferred to keep players local. I know that's why the affiliation in Rochester broke down, where the Revs weren't able to train with their players and assess their players. I know that in the case of Cody Cropper, he's still training with the Revs while going down and playing for Hartford on the weekends. But guys like Brian Wright and Zach Haribo, you wonder if the chances of them being re-signed with the Revs or being installed in the Revs' future plans, if that's harmed by the fact that they are training, thousands of miles away, and Bruce Arena doesn't get to see them every single day. So I think the positive of this team, at least playing in Foxborough, they could play in Providence or somewhere else or Worcester or wherever. But I do think that a lot of this is rooted in the fact that they want the USL side and basically a reserve side training with Bruce Arena, having a close eye on them and sending players back and forth depending on need and depending on skill level. So overall, I think it's going to be a really welcomed addition. In just a few short months under Bruce Arena, not only has the team turned around, but they have a training and academy program. They have a USL side. There are a lot of good things going for the Revolution in terms of player development, which I think has been really, really lacking for New England in the past few years. So more good news this week from the Revolution. I think we all kind of expected it coming eventually, but just more confirmation of it this week. So very exciting for the Revolution.
Yeah, and one more shout out before we wrap up. You mentioned Michael Parkhurst. Worth mentioning again that this is his last regular season game for Atlanta United, so it was good to see him kind of get the send off there, coming off the bench and all the cheering that the Atlanta United fans had for him. I think to me, there's no doubt at all that he was the best Revolution defender in team history, and obviously a Rhode Island product as well. Disappointing for Revolution fans that he didn't get to finish his career in New England, and that when he came back to MLS from abroad, the story was that he didn't really want to come back to the Revs. But obviously, when the Revolution were at their best in the mid 2000s, he was such a key player for them and made that 3-5-2 formation work when they were playing that. Just a phenomenal player and really a class act on and off the field. One of the nicest guys in the locker room, and always good for a post game interview, whether or not the Revolution won or lost. So congratulations to him on a great career. And while the Revolution will be doing their best to win next week or 2 weeks from now against Atlanta United, it'll be good to get another chance to see Michael Parkhurst play against the Revolution with the phenomenal career that he's had.
Yeah, hopefully his last regular season game and last game overall will be against the New England Revolution. So also should mention before we wrap up too that I sent out a tweet earlier, but I just want to reiterate it. Earlier in the week after it was announced Matt Turner made Team of the Week. Again, Matt Turner is the only keeper in MLS with 4 appearances on the MLS Team of the Week. And if you expand to include the bench, he's the only keeper in MLS with 5 appearances on Team of the Week. So I just want to say, Sean, are we in complete agreement that Matt Turner is the MLS goalkeeper of the year?
The only hesitation there, and we've discussed this before, is that at the end of the season he will have played, or it is the end of the season now, he's played less than 2/3 of the Revolution's games. In every other way, I think he's got a fantastic case for goalkeeper of the year. It's just a question of whether or not you can vote for a guy that I think finishes the season having played, I think, just under 60% of the team's games. So if he doesn't win goalkeeper of the year, blame Brad Friedel for screwing around with other goalkeepers early on in the season and not making Matt Turner the defined starter from the beginning. But certainly his play has been goalkeeper of the year worthy. It's just a question to me of can you vote for the guy that's played 60% of the games when there are other guys like Steve Clark and Bill Hamid that have strong cases too, and at least in Bill Hamid's cases has played a lot more matches this year.
Yeah, I mean, super disappointing answer because I am 100% sure that Matt Turner should be the goalkeeper of the year. Starting to get some public endorsements. I know Tom Bogart from MLSsoccer.com has said that Matt Turner is the goalkeeper of the year. He gets his vote. Matt Doyle has also said that Matt Turner is the goalkeeper of the year. There is an issue with time and games started there, but I think in the amount of time he has started, he has made up for it. And I mean, as I say, I think 5 appearances on Team of the Week in the last 11 weeks. Coming down the stretch, he has certainly helped the Revolution make the playoffs. We talk about Gustavo Bo putting this team into the playoff picture and Carles Gil putting this team into the playoff picture. I think Matt Turner, sometimes people don't realize how amazing of a season he is having, how many points he's kind of saved for the Revs. But he is certainly up there. And I do think it'll come down to minutes played and games started. And Steve Clark and Bill Hamid also have very strong arguments for goalkeeper of the year, but hoping MLS voters see the light and vote for Matt Turner. So that kind of wraps us up. Sean, where can people find you on Twitter?
Yeah, you can follow me at Sean L. Donahue.
And you can follow us on Twitter at Revolution Recap and like our Revolution Recap page on Facebook. Also, please leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening. We will be enjoying the international break next week like the rest of MLS, but we will be back in 2 weeks to break down the Atlanta Revs rematch, hopefully with some better results. Until then, thank you all for listening, and go Revs.